keynote speaker is going to be Keefe. And Keefe is a former United States Marine and Gulf War veteran turned human rights activist, marine conservationist, and social entrepreneur. He led the Human Shield action to Iraq and was a survivor of the Mavi Marmara during Israel's raid of the Gaza flotilla. Ken continues to be an active force in the front lines of social change and human rights in many parts of the world. Please, everybody, give a warm welcome to Mr. Ken O'Keefe.
Let's see. The first thing I have to say is I have to have a bit of a chuckle when anybody asks me to speak, especially if they're new at it. Gilad knows this as well, because there's really a lot involved with just organizing a regular event. But when you interview, or excuse me, when you invite certain people, there's going to be a whole ton of things that you never bargained for that are going to come your way and really test your resolve. And I know Tahra knows this now, but I've actually tried to dissuade certain people. In fact, I had an invitation to speak at probably the biggest Palestinian charity in Los Angeles a year ago. And for a year, they invited me 14 months ahead of the date. They wanted to secure it, and I said, okay, that's great. When they asked me, I thought, okay, yeah, you'll think about it for a while, and you'll reassess that. This is a big Palestinian charity. And, you know, they kept, and I was going through a period where there was just insanity, total insanity. I was being attacked on every level. I was even arrested here in the UK for fraud, of all things, for fraud. And, you know, I just kept trying to say, like, you know, it's okay, don't worry about it if you decide to back out. Honestly, I take no offense at all. But anyway, long story short, they ended up having me come. And it was a fantastic, huge event in Los Angeles. I mean, you know, probably 4 or 5 times the size of this. I mean, there's a huge amount of work that goes into getting that. People paid a lot of money to come. And I was immensely grateful. Because one, when somebody invites you, even if they don't know, if they stick with it, because you get attacked and your energy just gets consumed. These people are like vampires and they just suck the energy out of you, they suck the life out of you. Your enthusiasm gets drained by these people. It's part of why they do what they do. And it takes a lot, you know, it's sort of you create a relationship with somebody who invites you. I've only had one group actually invite me, Kent University of Kent, and they backed out in the last week or whatever. I didn't take it personally, but I made it clear to them that, you know, it's really a breach. It's a breach of trust. You know, you make an invitation to somebody, you should know who you're inviting, and if you're not ready for it, then don't do it. Because it's not about me, it's counterproductive. When these opposing forces who want to silence whether anybody who's a truth teller, when they achieve the goal, it emboldens them. And it really, really harms the process of understanding and truth telling. Anyway, that's my long-winded way of saying thank you very, very much, Tahra. I know you went through a lot. I never want to organize events like this ever again. I've done it before. I don't like it at all. It's a huge amount of work. Most people lose money at it. There's no way to make money, hardly. It's a really difficult job. So thanks to you, to Tyler as well, and everybody else. I'd like to give an illustration of how I see the world, which is, as my friend Les Visible said earlier today, dripping with irony. The way I see the world is we are basically, as people, collectively, the constructors of a massive prison. This prison couldn't have built itself, we had to build it. And collectively, we've taken all the materials required to build this massive prison. We have then voluntarily entered into the prison. Every last man, woman, and child, save a few, a very small few. We've entered the prison. We've then taken the key for the prison, closed the door, we've locked the door, and then we've handed the key outside the prison to a small group of individuals. And then we've given them the key, and then we've realized that we're now in a prison, and we proceeded to beg the person with the key that we just gave the key to and their friends to liberate us. Constantly, effectively, this is what we're doing. We don't actually see that even though we've built our own prison collectively, we can tear that wall down tomorrow. We could tear it down right now if we wanted to. Even though we've constructed a prison, it's right there in front of us. Ironically, if we want a better world, as Leslie said earlier today as well, I fully agree, the first task is to actually understand that it's possible. If you don't even conceive of something, then it definitely ain't gonna happen. So if you don't believe you can do something, you're right. You're absolutely right, you can't. But if you change that perspective and believe that you can do it, you're right, you can do it. And the only thing that stops someone from achieving a goal is just how determined are you? How committed are you? Are you willing to pay any price? How important is that goal to you? For me, there really is no greater goal than a better world. Before I was a father, I had a man named Russell Means. Some of you may recall Russell Means. He's a Sioux Indian actor. He only died last year, actually, or he passed on, rather. And he came and gave a talk in Hawaii, where I was at the time, and he was giving a story about his grandfather, who took him out over a hill, and they were looking out over the land, and he said, "Son, grandson, someday all of this land, someday, will not be yours. Welcome to America." But he also told him, "Always remember that you are the ancestor of those yet unborn." And when that sinks in, when that really sinks in, that the future generations are going to inherit what you leave them, if you really take that in, that's a serious responsibility. That's a significant responsibility. And I understand the reasons why many of us don't take that responsibility on. There's a lot of very understandable reasons why. Primarily fear would be the number one driving force. What they do in this process of indoctrination, which I was very much subject to, and I'm actually really grateful, because in the indoctrinated state that I was, that state that I haven't forgotten, I am able to look at others and see nothing but myself. That's me. The most ignorant, stupid, idiotic, thinking they're intelligent person, that's me right there. And therefore I don't look down on someone. It would be the height of arrogance to think that because somehow I've become aware of some things that previously I was oblivious to, that everyone else should in concert, in synchronicity, automatically start the same process of awakening that I'm on. That's my path, it's my pace, it's unique to me, and again, it would be arrogant to expect someone else to actually join me as much as I might like it. The fact is that we're all on a journey, and we all have a different pace. But there is a quickening of that pace, and for me, this is what's beautiful. Having been aware for a while, I remember 9/11 very, very clearly. I was living in Hawaii. I built my own business, a scuba diving business. I was a scuba diving instructor and a boat captain, living in paradise, with a place on the beach, had money, was doing what I loved, had respect in the community. Everything was fantastic. But I got involved in the Hawaiian independence movement, as you do. I'm living in Hawaii. I reckon, well, the least I can do if I'm living in Hawaii is try and understand the people who come from Hawaii, and if I could possibly understand their history, learn to understand their culture, and ultimately to earn their respect, then I'll have everything, really. Because until that time, all I really am is a settler of sorts, even though I might be contributing in a constructive way. If I haven't even bothered to take the time to know the people who come from this place, it's arrogant. It's just not right. So I made an active decision to learn about the Hawaiian cause. And it's the same pattern. Once you reach a certain point in understanding how the world functions, it's just the same pattern. The details are a little bit different. The severity is a little bit different depending on what tragedy we're talking about. But when we look at colonialism, when we look at the way the empires have functioned over millennia, it's the same pattern. And so it becomes actually quite easy to identify this. A lot of people get caught up on the details, and the details are important. There's a lot we can learn from the detail, but it's not the most important thing. What's important is to recognize the pattern. once you see the pattern, you can spot things very quickly. And this is a perfect example of Syria. Holy shit. Are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking kidding? Haven't we heard this whole new Hitler bullshit and fucking, oh my God, we gotta help the Syrian people and what? And the worst people in this scenario was the people who should have known this stuff. Anti-war, Palestinian supporters, Palestinian solidarity people, like, whoa. So wait, hold on a second. What we need to do now, apparently, is because Iran is the problem, right? And they're sowing sectarian hatred. And what we need to do is we need to go and go get this bad guy over here. Because if we take care of that bad guy, we're going to help these people. And the fact that people supposedly believe this stuff really indicates something that is undeniable once you can see. And that is there is a high level of mind control going on in this world. It is extraordinary. And as Gilad said earlier, actually, you don't have to be smart. I'm definitely not the smartest guy in terms of like being able to retain information and whatnot. I know people that can read a book and they know the book, inside out. That's not the way it works for me. But once you actually regain your capacity to think, this big brain that we have, and actually, there's a reason why we have a brain this size. It actually can perform pretty remarkably if you actually get the ability to use it back. For me, the most beautiful thing that ever happened to me was a trauma. This trauma put me in the position where ultimately I radically shifted the way I saw the world. And having grown up in America, like every other red-blooded American, I thought, my nation is the greatest in the world, freedom, democracy, and all this sort of stuff. Yeah, we make mistakes, but we're so much better than everybody else, that it's still better than what anyone else is. It's a form of supremacy, American exceptionalism. I bought into that rubbish. And, that's how I joined the Marine Corps. And for the first year, I was a good Marine, I did my job well. Everything I've ever done, I've always endeavored to do it well. I don't understand how people do stuff and they're just content to do it half-assed. Even if you're doing some mundane job, I don't get it. Do it well, That's the way I was as a Marine. And I could have gone down a path where I was trying to become, going to the equivalent of the Navy SEALs for the Marine Corps. I didn't know before I signed on. I could have got a guarantee, for reconnaissance, force reconnaissance, and this sort of stuff, snipers, and I would have. I totally would have gone for that. I just didn't know about it. By the time I got in, because I didn't have it in my contract, I was confined. I couldn't get into it, but I was trying to get into that. And for all I know, I could have gone down this path. And again, I'm not so arrogant to think that it couldn't have gone that way, where I would have loved the training, learning to skydive, I'm learning to fast rope, I'm learning to scuba dive, I'm driving Zodiacs, doing a lot of stuff that really, some of it can be really quite fun. I might have been a really enthusiastic mass murderer, would be called a hero when I'm coming home and all this sort. It could have easily happened to me, but it didn't happen that way. It happened another way. It all stemmed from speaking out about something. I was really quite naive, but I spoke out against abuse of power in the unit that I was working in. And what happened was, as a result of doing what I considered to be, well, not what I considered, what was the right and honorable thing to do, I was punished severely, to the point where if you're in the Marine Corps infantry, this is not like a job, this is more than a job. You're a slave, and those above you are your slave masters, and if you don't like your job, fuck off, you're gonna do your job, and if you complain about it, it's just gonna be 100 times worse. And if you want to transfer, well, you don't get a transfer. You get a shit beat out of you, and you're gonna be even worse, but you're not gonna get out of it, so you just have to deal with it. And this is what happened when I spoke out. I had to deal with looking over my shoulder continuously. I found out who my friends were, and I had like 2 out of a platoon of 40, which was an important lesson. Friends, Facebook is a perfect example of that. You have friends, right? Yeah, sure thing, friends. Yeah, I've got 5,000 fucking friends. Bullshit, friends are precious, and yet we don't even value them correctly. We don't even know who they are, for the most part. And we're mind controlled on so many different levels. As a recent example of this, I've realized something that I know some in here are probably going to take like, oh my, it's going to take you back, and you're going to start to reassess everything about me. You thought I was this, that, or the other, really good, or whatever. And this is a perfect example of it. I'm looking at 9/11. You know, I want to know the truth about 9/11, and I reckon I know quite a bit of truth about it. But I've realized only recently that something that I've been looking at, that I thought I've had a critical understanding of, I was blind to. I did not see it, and it is so obvious if you really take a look at it. And I'm not going to go into great detail, because really all I want to do is plant a seed here, and also prepare you, because I will be speaking about this, and watch what's going to happen. Watch the fucking nastiness that's going to come my way for doing this, and the person who's really responsible for bringing this forward. But if you look at the buildings, when they fell, and you really look close, and especially if you look at the pictures after the buildings fell, what you're going to find is that those buildings, 500,000 tons of steel and concrete and aluminum, basically turned to dust. Where's the building? The buildings basically disappeared. Now, if you took an equal amount of explosives or thermite, which isn't really an explosive, if you took an equal amount of whatever explosive device or thermite to an equal amount of steel, so 1-to-1 ratio, so like the point that I'm making here is if you took the actual weight of one of those buildings and put an equal amount of weight of explosives in those buildings, which is ridiculous, of course, it's not possible, but if you did, even if you did that, it would not turn those buildings to dust. It would not, no way. Obviously, we didn't have anything like a 1-to-1 ratio. And yet, those buildings turned to dust. How is that possible? If it's not possible by controlled demolition, then what else could have done it? And ultimately, the point that I'm making here is that for years, I looked at it and I assumed, and I concluded it must be a controlled demolition. What else could it be? But it wasn't. It's not. It doesn't fit the evidence at all. And I'm happy for this, because it's reminding me that as much as you think you've opened your eyes and you can now see things more accurately, no, you're not there. You know, and to get to that point where we can really see things as they are completely, in a whole, accurate way, it's a challenge, because we've had a lifetime of indoctrination.
Is that relating to Dr. Judy Wood's theory? Yeah?
She's definitely she's definitely at the head.
Yeah, I understand.
Judy Wood is definitely, yeah. But the point of it is not to debate this issue, but what I want you to remember from this day is that when I start to talk about this more, because you know I'm reading her book and I've looked at the evidence and I'm realizing what I thought just can't be true. It doesn't change the most important fact, and the most important fact is there's one thing for sure. Of all the people who could have been responsible for 9/11, the very last one on the list, the one that is 100% not responsible for this, is Muslims. Muslims did not carry out this event. No way. And yet, we have for the last 12 years attacked, invaded, occupied, tortured, mass murdered, traumatized, gassed, used experimental weapons on primarily Muslims. Not exclusively. There have been plenty of Christians in there too, getting their heads cut off in Syria, and all this sort of stuff. But primarily we've been attacking Muslims. There has been an active campaign to manipulate all of us into a war of civilizations, a clash of civilizations. Whether it was told to us directly or not, that was the whole point of it. And this is very important, because the only way that the system of tyranny can continue is for us to be convinced that we are all each other's enemies.
Yeah.
And as long as I gotta fight that person over there, or that person over there, and that person's trying to get my job, and I gotta take care of myself and survival of the fittest and all that, as long as we're in that state, we're effectively, that's us in the prison that we created for ourselves. We've handed the key outside and we're now begging someone to liberate us. This is ridiculous. It's such a transparent scam, it doesn't take a genius to figure it out. And I'm really happy because ultimately, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, especially on the day of 9/11, when I was sitting there in Hawaii in my paradise home with, coincidentally, a friend who I'd met recently from Iran who was staying with me. Fuck. I've never had an Iranian friend in my life, and now I've got an Iranian friend in my fucking house on the day of 9/11, and I know this is bullshit. And I know I don't have any ability to keep my mouth shut, and I also knew it was time to get out of Dodge pretty quick. And I left within 2 months. I'd already had arrest warrants, issued for me, big ones. And the cops in America don't joke around, man. If they look at a guy like me, and I've got a big warrant for my arrest for $11,000, the first thing they do is pull out the fucking gun and put your hands over your head, get on the ground, and if you make a false move, man, this is not a joke. So I left 2 months after 9/11, and I've taken the path less traveled by, for sure. I've taken the path of most resistance, and it has been an amazing, amazing ride, and I don't know how much mortal time I will have on this plane, but it doesn't really matter, because if there's one major tragedy in life, it is having this precious thing we call life, this beautiful, precious thing we have called life, and wasting it. Being conned into some stupid manipulation, mostly materialistic pursuits, shallow, physical, very transient pursuits that make us believe that this one fucking notion after another is somehow going to give us the one thing that, if we have even 1 ounce of sanity in us, that we all want, which is to be happy. If you're completely insane, then okay, you don't want to be happy. You're just completely gone. And there are people in that category for sure. However, if we even have an ounce, that's what we want. We want to be happy. The con is in getting us to think that we're going to get happiness in one way or another. And all of these ways are nothing more than red herrings. They're all lies. Mostly it's materialism. They get us also addicted to materialism. So when we get a job, this is the beauty of not making any money. What are you going to do, fire me? I don't make any money in the first place. Kind of hard to make me more uncomfortable than I am when in fact I'm not really basing my life on the comforts of money and all the things that it can buy. It's very liberating. For the last 12 years, ever since I left my job in Hawaii, I've had hand to mouth, I've always gotten what I needed, but I've also got a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old son, and I reached a point where, I gotta do something more for my family. So I'm starting to make some money now, which I'm really happy about as well, because for the last 12 years, I didn't make enough money to be taxable. So it doesn't really matter. But now, I think this year I might actually make enough money to be taxable, and I think the job that I've got is such that as a contractor, I will be able to take that money directly, which gives me the opportunity in the year, hopefully 2014, to say, fuck you right up the ass, I'm not paying 1 fucking penny of this money to your tax system, which is being used. I would be quite happy to go to prison before I would pay 1 tax beyond what I can avoid in your bloody fucking system, which is used to murder my brothers and sisters halfway around the world based on a pack of fucking lies. And that's the world we live in. And, I don't know why I go about things the way I do, but what I do know for sure is that there's this way of looking at life, and I think most people fall prey to it. And the way they look at life is, well, what's best for me? You know what? Just leave out 2 words. What's best? Leave out the last 2 fucking words. Never mind the for me. What is best? Because guess what? What's good for me is good for you. What's good for you is good for me. There's no way around that. Even if I'm clever enough to get over on you, even if I can find a way to take advantage of you, I haven't gained anything. All I've actually done is harm a fellow human being who's part of the same human family as I am, and I've also demeaned myself. I've lowered myself. I've taken advantage of whatever God-given, universal-given abilities I have to take advantage of someone else who's weaker than me. There's no gain in that. It's a con to think that you gain anything from that, and yet that is exactly what we're doing. In the West, we have this tremendous gift and burden at the same time. Some people are struggling so hard, whether it's their karma or not, they're struggling so hard that they're finding it next to impossible to even survive. They're living in a place that is so violent and so dangerous that they don't even know if they're going to live the next day, or how they're going to put food on the table, or how they're even going to protect their kids. None of that. Their whole life is based on survival. For us in the West, most of us, we have reached a point where while we're struggling, we do have a lot of time. We have a lot of energy left over that we could invest. Now, I realize most of us are struggling in terms of trying to get by, and we're basically having to sell our lives in order to be able to just live. We're slaves. We are slaves. Are we doing what we choose to do? No. The vast majority of us are not choosing what we want to do. We're doing what we have to do. We're selling our life to be able to get by. But it doesn't have to be that way. It just doesn't. There's the irony again. It's dripping. Really dripping. There's us in the prison again. You know. The key, from my perspective, of how to free ourselves from this, I guess before I'll say that though, however, is one of the most liberating things that I've come to understand is, while I'm not religious by any stretch, I put this to Les earlier today for a reason. I'm not religious, and I definitely see religion as a huge manipulation. There's a lot of truth in there, and it's really good, it's beautiful stuff. We should hold on to that. The Golden Rule is a perfect example. That's a beautiful thing. That is a truth. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Don't harm somebody else if you don't want to be harmed. Don't lie to someone else. Don't kill somebody. Don't rape someone. These are basic common sense things. That's a wisdom. We shouldn't get rid of that. That's a big part of Christianity, proper Christianity. Not the George Bush version of Christianity. You know, that's a bullshit version. And there's a lot of good in religion. But there's crap, there's manipulation in there as well. So be smart enough to see that and let go of the stuff that doesn't make sense, and hold on to that stuff that's good. And what's important about that is that if we are constantly trying to be part of the group that's right about everything, no, my group, we got it all perfectly right. All you folk just need to figure out what we have to offer because you're not doing it correctly. That's not a very workable solution. In fact, that's very much part of the problem. You may know some things, but you don't know everything. And other people may know some things that would be valuable to you. But where we should be focused is not on where we differ. Where we should be focusing is on where we have common ground. And on the most, not to be confused with common purpose. I've traveled a lot of the world. I've been very, very blessed to travel so many different places, and I swear the same all over. I see the same thing. People want the same thing. You know, in the aftermath of 9/11, it was, they hate our freedoms. And I can't hate, man. How did that even work ever for anybody? People want the same thing. They just want to live a dignified life. I don't have any problem with you. The first thing that people say to me in Iran or Palestine or Iraq or wherever I go, look, we have no problem with the American people, or the British people for that matter. We have no problem with it, but your governments. This is what always, it's like the first thing they say to me. They want me to know, like, look, we don't hate you. and the irony there is that actually, I'm half surprised you don't hate us all. And as far as I'm concerned, you have a lot of reasons to fucking hate us. Because while we sit here with our relatively comfortable lives, what are we doing exactly to stop the criminal activities of our governments? Which, whether we like it or not, even though we don't live in true democracies, these governments do speak for us. They do. And if you can't have it both ways. You can't. If you say, okay, I don't live in a democracy, all right, fine, okay, I will accept that. We don't live in true democracies. Which is another con because why would you want to live in a democracy in a heavily indoctrinated, ignorant society? And quite frankly, that's where we are still. We're not there yet. In a democracy where things are fluid and you could change day to day, That's a fucking disaster. In this world, what we need is a bedrock of certain rights, which are slightly different depending on what part of the world you live in. For sure. I'm not saying the Western version of rights. You need a bedrock of rights that cannot be touched. This is where, for instance, the US Constitution had a lot of promise in the Bill of Rights. These things cannot be touched. The supreme law of the land is what they call it in the Constitution. It's such a joke now. And you have these red-blooded American patriots who, what are you doing? Your country is being flushed down the toilet, and the US Constitution is literally toilet paper that you're using to wipe your backside with and throw in the toilet. That's what's happened on your watch. So the one good thing you have is being destroyed. We have to have a bedrock of rights, and those can't be tinkered with by an easily fooled majority. So for me, democracy is a great scam. I don't know why this was ever seen as like the great savior of humanity and whatnot. It's a great, great scam. In a better world, we won't even have any need for all of this nonsense that we have, even international law and all of this stuff, which we need right now to be applied equally. But ultimately, this is only into a transition into a better world where we become sane. And in a sane world, there are certain things that will have to exist. And this is sort of the top priority from my perspective. If we want to affect a better world, there is one thing above all others that is being used to oppress us. And the powers that be know that this is the linchpin of their power. And they are shitting themselves right now because more and more people are realizing the depth and magnitude of the scam that is the linchpin of their power, and that is the financial system.
Yes, absolutely.
The financial system is the head of the snake, and that head, basically what it has done is this system of power has turned everything literally upside down. Literally everything is upside down. So, when you have people in positions of public trust in a right side up world, what you would do is we would require that the people who fulfill those positions of public trust would be the most honorable, the most wise, the most respected. That's what you would have. Imagine a world like that. Even just talking about it, can you imagine if our so-called leaders were the most honorable, respected, intelligent? Fuck. I mean, we're so conditioned that the idea is foreign to even think that you would have something like that. That's the level of mind control, is that we've even accepted this. And this is exactly how the system is inherently fixed. Because those tiny few at the top of the pyramid who are treasonous puppeteers known as politicians have signed away the right to be able to issue money in the first place, they know that in order for them to maintain power, they must maintain control of two things, one of which they fucked up and they lost. And I don't know why they did it. There will be some who will make an argument that if no, it's all planned, don't worry, they're going to shut it down and da. You have to control information. Information is power. Information has always been held for the few. The masses cannot be allowed to have access to information. You let go of that, and you allow access to information, and you allow that information to be disseminated on not only a regional level, but a global level, even on an instant level. That's a big fucking problem. That is a significant problem. You have just lost control of one of the major tenets of your system of power. The other thing, which is directly tied to the first thing, is you must keep the people divided. At all costs, you cannot allow the people to unite. God forbid they ever figure out that while they're sitting there fighting each other, you're sitting up there in your pyramid at the very top, smoking your cigar and laughing your fucking ass off, because we're all sitting here fighting each other and bickering about the details of whatever it is that we consider to be the most important issue of the day. And ultimately, the only thing standing between us liberating ourselves or selling ourselves into collective suicide, literally, because that's what we're going to do in the nuclear age. We cannot sustain this. Ecologically, we cannot sustain what we're doing. Societally, we cannot sustain this. We've come this close more times than people realize, literally. Literally, it's the classic, we are like ostriches, and we have buried our heads in the sand, And we're pretending as if it's not the case. If we were saying, this would be paramount in our thoughts constantly. Holy shit. We are one button push away from the end of the world as we know it, literally. And we've come this close. This should be the top story. Like, we still have the capacity to destroy ourselves thousands of times over every day. We still have the capacity to destroy ourselves 1,000 fucking times. That should be the top fucking story, and we should insist on that. And we should be fixated on that. And we should be seriously pursuing everything necessary to solve that problem. And we should, for instance, be pointing out my birth nation, which is the biggest producer, user, distributor of weapons of mass destruction and has used atomic weapons on 2 occasions against civilian targets. The insanity of even allowing this nation to play any role whatsoever in who has weapons and who does not have weapons, especially in the aftermath of teaching the world very clearly, a la Iraq and Saddam Hussein, if you want to protect yourself, the last thing you want to do is get rid of your weapons. You better have some weapons. And ultimately, that's the lesson we've taught. If I was Iran, quite frankly, from a purely strategic point of view, I would do my best to say, oh, no, we're not pursuing any nuclear weapons. But I would be doing it secretly. And as soon as we got them, yes, we've got it. And here's our first nuclear test. And beware, if you come towards us, we're going to strike back.
Actually, they might already have one. They might have got one.
I don't believe that, actually. I've been to Iran. And you know, and I tell you,
don't need it.
I've known Muslims who are like Christians that I would love to have as my neighbors. No problem. We don't see eye to eye on especially heaven and hell and all this sort of stuff. I don't buy into a lot of it. But Christians who I would trust with my children, who are really honorable people. I've met a lot of Muslims like that too. And the Muslim leaders, of course, there are plenty of exceptions to this, but there are Muslim leaders in Iran, and I do believe at the top level, the supreme leader. If you look at the life they've lived anyway, especially Ayatollah Khomeini, we made this man out to be like, you know, the devil incarnate as well. And there's things I don't know per se about his life, but if you look at his life, very, very modest. He certainly wasn't in any way interested with material things, which is a check on the plus side for me. It's not the be-all, end-all, but they have said, and this is why I believe them, because although in the Western world, we accept the fact that our leaders are corrupt and they lie. That's just the way it is. So the idea that someone else might have a leader that actually doesn't lie and tells the truth is so foreign to us that we immediately assume that they're just lying. Well, the thing is that the supreme leader is somebody who's dedicated his life to a version of Islam that is far different from the Al-Qaeda version, the Salafi, Takfiri bullshit versions that we're involved with. And ultimately, your word is your entire existence. If you're sitting there telling an entire country, and the world for that matter, that no, we're not pursuing nuclear weapons, and the reason why we're not pursuing nuclear weapons is because according to our understanding of Islam, this is an affront to God. God created all that is, then we produce nuclear weapons, what is the purpose of that? You can say it's to deter, but ultimately if you produce something, ultimately you're going to use it. And it's quite sensible that God probably wouldn't find that too agreeable. I do believe that as much as the word God has been perverted, and I totally find like an Old Testament God and all this kind of stuff insane and incredible, that there is probably a thing we call God, whatever form it takes. And I'm sure that if there is some sort of creator, that the creator, even if he loved us so much, or she loved us so much, or whatever form it took, loved us so much, that it gave us free will. That even with that free will, certainly this God, this creator, would hope that we would choose, even though it was within our capacity, not to choose certain things, which clearly will only destroy that which is so blessed for us to have in the first place. So I believe the Supreme Leader when he says we're not pursuing a nuclear weapons program. Not only do I believe that based on my understanding, or at least the best understanding I have, but I'm also basing it on the fact that Iran has subjected itself to the most invasive nuclear inspections on the planet, a lot of the information being acquired during those inspections is fed to fucking bastards in Mossad and whatnot, and they're using their assets to kill nuclear scientists in Iran with that stuff. And if I were them, I'd say, you know what? Enough already with your UN and whatever that shit is. You know, you're taking away information. Some of those people are scientists, nuclear scientists, or fathers. You know, their children no longer have a fucking father because we're feeding information through these inspections. Yeah.
Okay, just on the subject of Iran, I'm not actually aware of the Keefe Foundation announced about a year ago that technology was going to be released to sort of like a few nations as well, where basically it's create technology that neutralises nuclear type weapons, etc. And since that sort of announcement, they've taken down a couple of drugs in Iran. I'm just wondering if you knew anything about that in terms of knowledge on the ground.
No, I don't, to be honest, and that would be a really beautiful thing. How fantastically beautiful would that be?
Yeah.
For Iran to come up with a way to neutralize any... Wow, that would be fantastic,
Well,
wouldn't
check
it?
out the Keefe Foundation, how true it is, it needs research, etc. But it seems to be genuine,
Yeah,
very genuine, trying to give the technology to the planet.
yeah.
And he's trying to negotiate with the nations, etc.
Well,
Like one of them strands.
That can lead me into the next part, which is really solutions. I don't know if that technology exists, but I don't doubt it. If you believe it's possible, well, you're right. It is possible. If you believe there's a way to rid ourselves of these things called nuclear weapons and all sorts of other weapons, you're right. Well, and that brings me back to Dr. Judy Woods, and the reason why,
The nuclear side.
if indeed the buildings on 9/11 were not brought down by explosives, and I say to you all, 100%, I have no doubt of this at this point. I think any objective look, and I mean no offense to all the people in the truth movement and whatnot who believe it was controlled demolition, explosives, and I understand, you're vested in that, but there you go. It's time to challenge your cherished beliefs because some of them are not constructive. The reason why it's important to take a look at what Dr. Judy Wood is saying is because Nikola Tesla, over 100 years ago, had a way to be able to provide free energy to this entire planet, which of course would have liberated us from the bondage of petroleum dependency and the insanity of destroying our planet with wars and pollution based on a fucking addiction to petroleum, which we never needed. We never needed. And if indeed these buildings were taken out by directed energy, then that's proof that this technology does exist. And it's also proof that that technology could be used in a destructive way, even to the point where some theorize that the planet could be literally split in half. Or it could be used to liberate all of humanity and provide free energy to everyone tomorrow. And that's a solution. That's a big solution, big time. And I'd argue that it sits there right before us. But the one thing that we need to do physically is already happening right now. And I say this again, the powers that be are shitting themselves. Because so many people already know this. And they're talking to other people about it. And they're sharing videos on the internet. And I'll be talking about it. And I've got my own television program. And there's a chance that that audience will be in the millions. And I don't care what they do or don't do to me. I'm going to continue to do what I feel is right regardless. And ultimately, there are a lot of people out there, far more courageous than anything I've done. There are people out there that are doing things that are absolutely mind-blowingly courageous every day. And they ain't on television. They ain't getting the attention that I'm getting or other people are getting. And I never lose sight of that fact. But these are the people that inspire the hell out of me. There are some people in this world who cannot be bought. Cannot be bought. What are you going to give me? Trillions? Sorry, not enough. I'm not taking any price for anything to take away my self-respect. I will die with my self-respect one way or the other. And I don't believe in death on that note. But anyway, the one thing we need to do is understand the financial system. We can, on this planet right now, we could get rid of a central banking, big banking system. We could keep some of it, quite frankly, if we change a few of the rules. And those rules are very simple. One, the money production has to be held for every nation, at least. You could break it down into smaller communities as well. It doesn't have to be on a government nation level, but at least we could have it on a nation state level. And if we take back the control of the issuance of money, we do it in a non-usury way, no interest, we do it in a transparent way, that's not unachievable, that's totally achievable. And we don't use fractional reserve. If we do it under those parameters, every single nation on this planet will find that they've gone from a position of scarcity to an immediate position of abundance. And every single nation on this planet would be able to have world-class healthcare, genuine healthcare, not this bullshit fucking drug industry known as Western medicine. They'd be able to have world-class healthcare, proper education, real education, true wisdom passing on to the next generation. We'd be able to have world-class infrastructure everywhere. There would be no starving people, everyone would have a home, everyone would be able to do a fulfilling job, everyone would be able to live in dignity. This is completely and totally possible, and the only thing that needs to change is the private control of the issuance money put in the hands of the people. Just that one simple thing. So the way we do that is, first you have to be aware of it. So I'm doing my part once again. Many of you obviously already know this. In fact, be honest.
But what can we do? Give us a call to action.
Just be honest with me here for a second. How many of you already figured out that really the head of the snake is the financial system and taking? Excellent.
Get rid of
There you go,
the
yeah.
bank.
There you go. I mean,
Not just that,
no, it's not the only, but every other problem you've got. You name me a problem. Name it.
the pathogens of our species who have managed to seize control over everybody else's lives and are now on countdown to extinction. As you
Okay.
said, I don't want to take much longer because I was going to ask the question time came. But simply, we've got to dismantle all the establishment structures of government and everything associated with it. This means the law, the church,
Agreed.
the whole establishment. It's a minimum five-headed hydra, including the press, the mainstream.
It all stems from that financial system.
It's a cancer
Yeah.
in our midst, and we've got to get rid of the whole thing and start again.
Okay.
If I get another chance, I'll tell you why I'm here and what I'm doing.
Okay. When question time comes, I'll happily have you take the podium for a second. What we can do, the first step is again, and you know, people say constantly, what can I do? It's ironic again. Seek information, which you're already doing by asking that question. What can I do? Well, you're now already seeking to understand things better. So continue seeking. Speak to your friends and your family and your colleagues. When people think, you know, obviously if I can get on a television program and there's an audience of thousands or tens of thousands or millions, well, okay, yes, it's a greater opportunity, and therein lies the importance of the powers that be controlling the mass media. But even that game is no longer working. They're losing their market share. The legitimacy of the mainstream media is dwindling, and this very important pillar of control is diminishing in effectiveness rapidly, and they know it. But the dissemination of information is critical, and people don't realize irony. Nothing is more effective at transferring information and affecting change than talking to your wife, your husband, your children, your sister, your colleague, friends, people, one-to-one or small groups. That makes all the difference in the world. It is the one thing they cannot completely control. They try and control every other aspect, and in some societies, in fact, they have said groups of 3 or more cannot come together for this very reason. You know, and a more direct and honest totalitarian society, we wouldn't be able to have groups like this either. But they don't need that, because no one is more hopelessly enslaved than the one who falsely believes himself to be free. And that's the beauty of their system. They've conned us into believing that we're free. You're selling your life just to put food on the table and a roof over your head. That's not freedom. So you're already doing it. Physically, however, what we need to do is just expose this system, at every level. So, however you do it, if you do it in a small group, what Tahra's done, she probably never wants to do again in her life, but nonetheless, she's managed to get a group of people together, some of whom are going to come away from this rather inspired and who are going to do something. And that's what you should do. That's your action plan. But for me to tell you, oh, you should do this specifically, come on. That is signing away your responsibility to someone else, and that's a huge part of the problem. It's not up to me to tell you. Just do what's right. What's right for you is slightly different than what's right for me in terms of what is the very best thing that I can do. We have different lives. We move in different circles. You know deep down, whether it's in the subconscious level or the conscious level, you know deep down what is right. Do that, whatever it is.
Right.
Isn't it true, though, that the 3 American presidents who wanted to change the financial system so that it was debt, interest-free, were all assassinated?
That's right.
Yeah, they tried to get Andrew Jackson, but they didn't quite get him. Yes, it's true. But we're not presidents, so we don't have to worry about that as much. If a president wants to do it, then he can sign an executive order and make it happen tomorrow. For us, it's going to take a little bit longer. And obviously,
That happened 50 years ago.
what's that?
He signed an executive order.
He did indeed, yes.
Yeah.
As Kennedy was the last president that actually had a spine, and actually, and he was a servant to the rich his whole career. It's not like he was always Mr. Noble, but he did some things that were extremely dangerous, and it ain't no coincidence what happened to him and why.
I say in Christianity, usury used to be abolished. But we've done away with that, whereas the Muslims still keep that. So that's why they're a problem.
Well, exactly. That's a very strong and important point, very valid, and it is no coincidence. And even though I believe Islam is very much part of a manipulation in a bigger picture, it doesn't mean a lot of things. They try and co-opt things or they create things to control us, but oftentimes, because these things actually have quite a bit of truth. For instance, the United Nations. That was created to satiate the demands of the people in the aftermath of World War II, who realized, holy shit, we cannot survive World War III. There needs to be a mechanism in place to be able to prevent that from happening. Lo and behold, we had the UN. But from the beginning, it was rigged. And they had things like the 5 permanent members and veto status and things like this, which prevented that from actually achieving the stated goals. But of course, the stated goal was different from the real goal. The real goal was to be able to allow and provide cover for the never-ending process of war and tyranny that exists and has been, accelerating ever since the United Nations was formed. But we could still, why couldn't we tomorrow have a global campaign with literally billions, certainly hundreds of millions, who say, you know what, the 5 permanent member thing, it ain't working. So what we're going to have is a United Nations system, and I'm not saying necessarily that this is what we have to do, but I think it would be a step in the right direction. Even though Russia, thank God Russia's done what it's done, and China has done over the last few months. And actually, let me just say this, I can't believe I didn't talk about this, because if there's one thing to inspire from what I've seen, this is it right here. You go back in history, and you name me a time where the powers that be had something that was very important, critical on their agenda, something that they planned out, and for those of us who are paying attention, we can see it. So Syria, come on, that was planned out long ago. It clearly has nothing to do with Bashar al-Assad and concern for the Syrian people. It's laid out in more position papers than most know about. It's been stated over and over in many different ways. So this was planned out a long time ago. This is important to them. This is an important part of their plan. Ultimately, the point of Syria, aside from, again, getting control by having the financial system in every part of the world, which effectively makes complete control over those regions, was to get to Iran. And the reason why they need to get to Iran, aside from the fact that they're not down with the program, is ultimately, at this stage of human existence, the powers that be need a third world war. They need, if I was in their position, and I do try and put myself in the position of a tyrant and a psychopath who's got an extraordinary amount of control via an infinite supply of money and a huge list of puppets and minions around the world who will do your bidding on every level. When you have that kind of power and you see, you're not stupid, you see the awareness that is happening, you realize this is seriously dangerous. And in fact, your position is becoming more and more untenable. By every waking moment, their position is becoming more and more untenable. The only thing that will save them at this point is a third world war. They need a third world war. They must instigate a third world war. And the way to get to that war was through Syria. They've been trying with Iran for many years, and they have not been able to get it. Even Israeli Mossad, former Israeli Mossad, CIA officials have said at top levels that not only is there no evidence that Iran is involved in a weaponized nuclear program, but it would be insane for us to attack them. This is Mossad and the CIA. These are rubber stamping organizations. These are the ultimate minions of the powers that be who are there simply to enforce policy and to rubber stamp it. And they're not agreeing. What does that tell you? Is this part of the plan? No, that's not part of the plan. There are some people who historically have basically done whatever it was they were told to do, but more and more people are realizing, including in high positions at the Pentagon and the CIA, the FBI, the Mossad even, that are realizing, holy shit, I think they're having what's a Kennedy moment. I believe Kennedy was transformed after the Cuban Missile Crisis. I think he realized, as a servant to the rich, I have no problem with serving the rich, I have no problem with the life of privilege that comes with doing this job, but fucking A, man, did I just bring the world to the brink of a total fucking nuclear war and destruction of everything? He did, and I think that is what changed him. I don't know any other way to explain why he did what he did. What, he stupid? What he was saying about secret societies and signing an executive order that would have given the power for the government to mint the money and all this sort of stuff, and getting rid of the CIA, insisting on inspections of Dimona in Israel, also the Zionist Council of America, I forget what it's called, it's the precursor to IPAC. He wanted to register it as a foreign aid. These were all very dangerous things. And that's what's happening in the system of power, is that you've got people in high positions who are having a Kennedy moment and realizing, holy shit, man, I can't do that. I've got to say something here because we could destroy everything. And I've got children too. And where are they going to live? You know, this isn't just a war in Syria or Iraq. This is a fucking war that's going to come back home, and it's going to kill my children as well. More and more people are realizing that. And in Syria, this is the first time in modern history, I point out an exception to this, point out another example of this. I have not seen one. This is the first time that we as people have asserted our power. And you know what it took to assert that power? Russia. Don't buy the bullshit. Don't buy it, don't believe it. You're all fucking lying. We're sick of war. Fuck off. 10% approval in the United States, 9% approved of an action in Syria. And in this country, pretty much the same. That is why the parliament did not vote to bomb Syria. Because regardless of what people tell you, and no matter what you're led to believe, they need our fucking consent. They need it. They need it. They need to have at least some of it. Because if they make a move against virtually everyone in society, guess what? All fucking bets are off.
Yeah.
That's it. Nope, that's it. End of story. Finally, you pushed us too far. And now, you're going to find out who the fuck you were supposed to serve and the consequences for committing one last act of treason. No more. And they know it. They know this. And Syria didn't happen because we didn't need to protest. No need to protest. And I think that's beautiful too, because I have a bad taste in my mouth from the way so many fucking protesters and activists carry themselves. I am an activist. At the same time, I'm rather ashamed of the way so many activists act. Whether it's stupid things like trying to antagonize police and treat them like they're subhumans, when in fact these people are also trying to feed their kids. And many of them are decent people. They're not bad people at all. Some of them are fucking power-mad pricks and they need to be confronted, but many of them are not. And we should look at them as the future heroes that they are, because amongst the ranks of the police and the military are some of the biggest heroes in the future. They're coming. They're going to defy the orders. And they're going to fucking end this system, probably more than others in society, these people. So we need to treat them with respect. We need to have the courage and the wisdom to know that these people are our fellow human beings as well. We can change this world, and this Syria thing to me is so beautiful. It's so funny. It's right there staring us in the face. They could not do something that was so critical to their agenda simply because we did not consent. That's it. Imagine that taken to the next level. Not only do we not consent, we insist on certain things, such as no more 5 permanent members in the UN. No. And the Bank of England, European Central Bank, Goldman Sachs, the Federal Reserve, fuck off to all of you. You consider yourselves lucky if you're hanging from a lamppost. If you're not drugged through the streets and fucking skinned alive and for really tortured for fucking decades before you perish, consider yourself somewhat lucky, because you couldn't even begin to measure the amount of suffering that has come from this system. Nothing has created more death, more suffering, more pain, more injustice than the usury-based banking system that we've been shackled with for so long. They know this, and they're shitting themselves, because more and more people are realizing these truths. All we need to do is not consent.
Yeah,
It's that simple.
They might need another false flag to preempt it.
It is very possible.
By the way, I'm not going to be able to swear like this on my new live television show, so I think I'm getting it all out of my system.
I think you should practice not swearing.
I can turn it off, it's not a problem.
It is very possible. It is very possible that we are missing a crucial point here. You just spoke about Goldman Sachs and the Federal Reserve. And it is very possible that the financial system is what it is because it's a symptom of the people who are running the financial system. And the financial system in the West, especially in America and in Britain, is run by pretty much a tribe, and we know a single tribe, and we know who they are. Now, this is a very problematic issue, and I'm definitely not a Marxist, never been a Marxist. Maybe I've been, there was a week, you know. but Marx wrote a very interesting text before he himself was a Marxist.
Another Freemason, wasn't it?
Yeah, but he wrote a very interesting text that is called On the Jewish Question. And he actually predicted that America is destined to become the Jewish promised land, which is amazing. And he spoke about the usury, and he spoke about all the symptoms that we are talking about now. Now, I take it one step forward, and I go to Syria. It is not very clear to me, and I agree with you on probably 99% of the thing that the way that you express them. I'm not so sure at all that the world is in such a devastating state because there are very bad people who are running it. It is very possible that the world is in a very devastating state because it's actually true reflection of who we are.
Both are true. Both are true. You're absolutely correct. Both are true.
The most important thing is that the world was always a reflection of who we are, and it was in different states. What is so important about what we are doing here today is, and we have to do many of those, is that we can be a correction, start a kind of a process of a correction mechanism, and I say we, but actually quite a few people around are already involved in this process. And I think that the most important thing that you said, and Les mentioned it before, and I actually spoke about it, rather than waiting for instructions, rather than waiting for a progressive moron that will tell us what is right, what is righteous, what is good for us, it is the time to look in the mirror, to close your eyes, to stop looking in the BBC that doesn't tell you that what is happening in the world. Think for yourself. And this is the most crucial issue.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think we agree on 100%, Keefe. The world is what we make of it. That's why I started off with the prison sort of example. You know, we can get out of prison. And it does. That system reflects us. We've allowed that. So how could they do that without our consent? We consent to it. Yeah, okay.
No, thank you. I think your approach is certainly one that might win the day, as it were, but we're fighting, or rather, sorry, that's the wrong word, we're challenging people who've been planning what they're doing now for several hundred years, and we're not going to suddenly overturn their plans overnight by luck, even with brave people like yourself at the helm, going along and challenging their flotillas. their navy and so on. It's a big job, and it should start with painting a few scenarios of where we want to be, how we're going to get there, what they might do to stop us when they find out what we're planning to do to overturn their nice little earner. And it's quite a long job, I can tell you, and it probably needs some inspired people to set out these scenarios, probably rather secretly, I suppose, in order to stop them being surveyed upon. Difficult in itself. And then a lot of people have got to get together to plan the way forward. Now that plan has got to be so robust that nothing they can do will stop it. And the hope is, and the basis for one's even saying this, is that they are only a small minority, probably 2, maximum 10% of the world. Actually, it's probably 0.1% who really run the thing.
Zeros.
And there are 90% of us. 90% of the world is us, and a good deal of the world is the non-aligned world. In other words, the poor people of this world who've got a lot more to gain than anybody in this room, I guess, by overturning the system. Colonel Gaddafi tried to do it for the poor people of Africa by suggesting a global gold currency, for example, that everybody controlled, so they all had a resource rather than a piece of paper, that when the bank in America decided to inflate the value of or deflate the value of by printing more of it, they all suffered. And that would have given them a bit of leverage over the corporate giants that have fleeced Africa and other poorer parts of the world of their resources. So there's hope there, even though it's a big job. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
I'm game for it if anyone wants to help me.
I would just say that anything of value is not easy. You have to struggle for it. You have to be willing to invest. Risk is proportionate to reward. You have to invest heavily in something if it's worth it. If survival of the human species and all other life on this planet and a future for our children ain't worth fighting for, then I just don't know what is. So obviously we'll have to invest significant energy. Some are going to be imprisoned, tortured, and killed along the way. It's been that way for a long time, and that ain't going to stop for a little bit yet. But I would disagree with anyone who suggests that this is going to be a long, drawn-out process. We are finding ourselves, I believe, without any doubt, this generation right now is going to decide the fate of this world. We cannot sustain the path that we're on in the nuclear age. Again, we've come this close so many times, and ultimately it's going to be one or the other. Either we're going to reach a point of sanity, which I think is going to be linked to something known as critical mass, the tipping point. This is another thing that I think holds great promise, and it's not something that we should consider as some sort of savior, but it's there. And there are examples of this physically. If you, for instance, we can see this, we can observe this. If you walk into a room and you do an experiment with a group of people, and you walk in, or you walk in, that has an effect on the environment around you. If you are thinking about, oh, I want to buy that new model car, and damn, if I just work my way in, I'm going to get that higher paying. If that's what you're thinking, that definitely affects those around you, whether it's your family members, your colleagues, or whatever. If you adjust your way of thinking, and that's what's happening, people are adjusting their way of thinking, and ultimately there's a point, and I believe we're getting very close, where it's going to permeate. It's going to permeate all aspects. So you don't need to explain to somebody how to set up a non-usury based bank for the people transparently. It will simply be understood. And the benefits of having such a system won't have to be explained. It will just simply be understood. And it will happen very quickly. We will not survive much long in this state of collective insanity. We will not. And that's kind of good, actually, because for me, I'm kind of tired of playing this game of pretending as if the illusion is a reality and that we can continue to carry on like this as if it's acceptable. how do you accept the unacceptable? It is simply unacceptable. Unacceptable that my brothers and sisters are being murdered, that my children have no future, that you're trying to extract more wealth from me while giving yourself more power when you've already proved yourself to be nothing more than a minion of tyrants. This is not acceptable. More and more people are realizing that, and ultimately what that's going to lead to is the understanding that, well, it is that way, as Gilad just said, it's that way because we allow it to be that way. That's going to change.
Okay, one last question, a really quick question. We've got lots more to cover before the jazz concert.
There's only 2 hands up, and I did say I'd come to you, but I
Okay,
haven't
last
asked
two
you.
really quickly.
Very briefly, I wanted to follow up my original statement. Almost 99% of what you've said I found affinity with. It's what you haven't said, maybe, and of course there isn't time. I've been working for 30 years to try to get people to wake up to what is going to be needed when whatever cataclysm comes to cause this necessity. The idea is that we remove, as I say, we dismantle existing structures. The only people who can do it are in this room, I mean outside, not only these people. We need to remove sovereign power, such as it may be called, to the localities, the smallest localities, the parishes. Nobody in any larger grouping of parishes or any other group can say what these people must do or how much money they must have taken from them. So we must get ourselves ready on the ground in our localities to
Decentralize control of the community you live in.
organise ourselves. But just to finish, 2 other things essentially. We must disarm worldwide. There must be no more armaments. What started in Syria as a bit of a token thing against weapons of mass destruction, weapons of germ warfare. I mean, what's the difference between being killed by a germ or by a nuclear bomb? I'm sorry, if I'm not here, then my life has been stolen from me by people who I despise. So it's locality. We've got to build our local things, and we've got to take control. It's simply that. And we take control ourselves. And I would say if you do have a vote, for God's sake, stop voting for any of the London party people. Vote for your independence. Better still, stand yourself. I would like to see 50 candidates for every parliamentary seat. That might stop the elections for a start. But if they got elected, the worst people are the people who don't vote, because these criminals are getting in now with 18% support. That's 82% against them. That's why there's no democracy. We have to use this corrupt system ourselves, take it over, and start getting power back where it belongs at the smallest level. Thank you.
I just, a very quick response to that. I disagree in terms of the voting thing. What has been lacking is a very organized vote of no confidence. Not voting, I agree, is just apathetic, although it does have some positive effect in that the system is becoming illegitimized. But that in itself is not enough. We need to illegitimize the system, and as you've, I think, suggested or said, we need to propose what it is that we demand at the same time. We can do that. But I don't think voting in the system as it is, unless there is a very organized, we can count the votes of no confidence and establish that, because that will delegitimize the government and compel change rapidly. Well, I disagree on that point, but we're agreed on 99%, which is a great start. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, very, very much.